Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. I'm sick of playing games with people who don't know how to play them. The card game War. It's a very simple game. Probably the simplest card game anyone could possibly think of. You flip over a card, your opponent flips over a card. If your card is higher, you take their card. If their card is higher, they take your card. And if the card's tied, then you have a war. And so every time you have a war, you increase the number of cards. You go one card for the first war, you put down one card, then you flip another one over. Second war, you put down two cards, then you flip another one over. Eventually, you're going up to a war of 10 or 11 or 12 cards, and at some point, somebody won't have enough cards to put down. And then they will lose, and the game is over. It's a beautiful moment. But I learned that some people don't play the card game War that way. I played the card game War with some people, and every time there was a war, every time there was a tie between the two cards that were flipped over, they would put down two, face down, they'd flip over a third card. I said, you're supposed to go up. The number is supposed to increase. They said, no, it's always two. And I said, then the game will never end. The game is supposed to end at some point. It's a war, and if you don't have enough cards, that's too bad. That's the way that war works. If you don't have enough troops, you lose. That's just the way that it is. And they said, no, that doesn't seem very nice. I said, the point isn't to be nice. The point is for the game to be over at some point. And I was playing, and we got so frustrated, they just took all the cards and they just shuffled them all up together. And they said, fine, I'm just done. If that's the way you want to play, I'm done. And I said, well, now you ruined the game for sure. People need to stop putting money on free parking. I don't know if anybody plays Monopoly anymore. My assumption is that some of you did, and you put money on free parking. No, don't do that. Don't put money on free parking. That's not in the official rule book. You can read through the rules. You're not supposed to get money when you land on free parking. That just makes the game longer. The point of the game is for it to end. You don't have a Monopoly, you lose. Too bad. That's just the way that it goes. Somebody's supposed to lose. And in Monopoly, they lose the most brutal loss of any game that I think I've ever played. And that's the way it's supposed to be. No mercy. You just keep on playing. There's a right way to play and there's a wrong way to play. And some people will say, I don't want to play that way. I want to be friends with the people that I'm playing with after the game is over. No, the point is to win. There are a lot of card games like that. Card games where the point is to win, to rip off the other person. Go Fish is a brutal game. If you play that with little kids who aren't holding up their cards, and you can see their cards, would you tell them, hold up your cards, I'm not supposed to be able to see your cards, or would you say, well, they're going to have to learn one way or another. You got a 3? You got a 4? How do you know? Just a good guesser. And the way that I've played in my family is if you get the card that you asked for, you get to go again. You can run the table against a 3-year-old. It's a lot of fun. Some people would say, you shouldn't play the game that way. But you know what? The point is to win. The point is not to make friends. And some people would say about card games altogether, there's no point to playing them at all. It's just a waste of time. You know, at one point in the Christian church, preachers would get up in a pulpit and they would say, do not play card games. Don't play with cards. Those are the devil's tools. They would say something along those lines. Cards are bad. Now, we know that card games aren't super important, but somehow the game does matter. It matters and it doesn't matter. I mean, if somebody just got up and flipped the table in the middle of the game and walked away, we would know that was wrong. But they would say, so what? It's a game. Going to get mad about it? Yeah, I'm going to get mad about it. It's not the way you're supposed to play. because it matters. You'd say, no, it doesn't. It's a card game. Well, that's true. So it matters and it doesn't matter. I've had sermons where I spoke specifically to the men. Father's Day, let's talk to the fathers. Mother's Day, let's talk to the mothers. I think with this text and with this kind of self-reflection that Solomon has, he's an older man. I think it's fair that I address the older generation this morning. Solomon is looking at everything that he's done, everything that he's accomplished, and he says the same thing that some people say about card games or about any sort of activity. It's meaningless. There's no purpose to it. Here is everything that I worked for, everything that I achieved, and I didn't get anything out of it. A lot of you are retired already. You worked a lot of different jobs. Some of you worked in the same place for 40 years. It's not real common anymore, but some of you were able to pull it off. Some of you even have a pension from that company that you retired with. Congratulations. But after you worked there for 40 years and built up a reputation in the company as somebody who's hardworking, as somebody who's trustworthy, then you had to hand it over to somebody else. Some acne-riddled, freckled 25-year-old who is now going to take over your position. And are they going to do just as good of a job as you did? I don't think so. How could they? How could they? But everything that you spent your life working is now handed over to somebody else. I mean, some of you have owned your own company, and at some point you're going to hand that over to somebody else, and then they're going to be in charge. And then we hear about this company has been a fixture. They've been here on this street for 35 years, for 40 years, for 50 years, and now they're closing. New management. I would think that would hurt. That'd be painful to see everything that you, and it's not yours anymore, you realize that, but everything that you've worked for, to see it go away. There are a lot of career-oriented people. They didn't have time for a family. They spent their time with their work, and they invested time into children, into adults, into people. Good. That's worthy. But then, at the end of their life, they found that there's nobody left. They don't have any family. Their clients have left them a long time ago. They have nobody. That's sad. Sometimes that's what happens. Even for those of you who have made your life's work your family, your children, your grandchildren, you have been there for them, and they have not always been there for you. It's disappointing when I visit people in an assisted living facility, and I was their first visitor in the last month, because no family was there for them. That's the sort of thing that would make you look back and say, was that worth it? Was any of that worth it? Was the company I built worth it? Was my family worth it if they're not here for me now? All those people that I touched, their lives, I affected them, and they're not here now. What's the point of any of this? And for that matter, what's the point of all these possessions that I've built up? I know that when I go, my children and my grandchildren are not going to appreciate all the things that I have. By now you have a house full of stuff. You have, some of you have rooms for seasonal stuff. You have a Christmas room, you have a Halloween room, you have a Thanksgiving room. Or if not a room, then at least you have boxes full of stuff to decorate your house at the appropriate season. Do you think your kids are going to appreciate your stuff the same way that you did? When parents or grandparents pass away, their children divide up their things, and mostly what they're going to care about is not the blankets that you've crocheted. It's not the paintings that you made by yourself and you put up on the wall. It's not the hours of home video that are on film or on VHS or even digital. It's probably not even that. It's not the boxes of photos. Some of them will care about that, but most of them no. They want your money. And my guess is that already you have kind of a sense for how long that money is going to last. It's not fun to think like this, but it's worth doing. It's what Solomon was doing when he looked at his life. He was considering all the things that he had accomplished, and he said, I realize now I worked for all of that, I had all of that, and I'm going to have to give it to somebody else, and he might destroy it. Here's a list of, Solomon lists earlier in chapter 2, all the things that he made, all the things that he got. Here's what he says. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself, planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of trees. I had male and female slaves. I owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I had silver and gold, the treasure of kings. I had men and women singers. I had a harem. I was greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. And he's not happy, because it's not going to last. In verse 18 says, I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to one who comes after me. Everything I've built, everything I've accomplished is being left to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool? And Solomon asks that, but you already can guess that he knows. He handed the kingdom over to his son, and his son pretty much flushed it down the toilet within a year. The wisest man, and he says, I did all this for nothing. So how can we go to sleep and say, I'm happy with what I did with my life? I think this was worthwhile. I'm glad all the hours that I spent doing what I did. I think something good was achieved. I know that it will last beyond just me. Can you say any of those things? Solomon said, I can't. He was wiser than us. There's one thing that he left off of that list. It's a brutal list, though. He says all of a person's days, they have work and they have grief, and at night their mind doesn't rest either. It's the case for some people that I know. Even at night they can't sleep. They work hard all day, and at night they can't sleep because they're stressed out about yesterday, about tomorrow, especially about today. But there's one thing that Solomon left off of this list. He lists everything that he made. He spent years and years building a palace for himself. He had more silver and gold than anyone before him. He had more sheep. He had more cattle than anyone before him in Israel. But the thing that he doesn't mention is the temple. Solomon spent more time in his life building his own house than in building God's house. But from this list of things that he accomplished that he considered worthless, he does not mention the temple. The temple that he built to God. The temple that was made out of fine wood, was made by craftsmen, was covered in gold everywhere on the inside. The years and years that were spent building the temple that lasted for hundreds of years after Solomon, he does not regret that. Everything that he did for himself, he does. That's what he said about everything that he did for himself. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards, etc., etc., etc. I did all that for me. I didn't do it for my kids. I didn't do it for the nation. How do you think he got so wealthy? He taxed the people really heavily. And then after Solomon, the people said, hey man, if you ease up on the taxes, we'll love you forever. And he said, no man, I'm going to tax you even harder. And they said, no, we're going to leave. He did all that for himself. And he said that was worthless because now it's gone. Or it's already going to go. And I can't take it with me. And so it seems to me That if we look back on our lives and we say, all that I did, the plaques that I earned, the trophies that I won, even the children that I had, the people that I interacted with, if I did all that for me, then I can't say I have any lasting value out of that. I can't say that I did it with a pure heart. I can't say I did it with good motives. And I sure don't know if it's going to last. But Solomon did at least some of what he did for God. And he doesn't regret that at all. Without God, nobody can find happiness, can find enjoyment. You might know some unbelievers who think that they're happy without God. But I promise you that they are not. That's what Solomon says. Without God, who can eat or find enjoyment? To find enjoyment in simple things is from the hand of God. To have comfort when you go to bed at night, knowing that whatever I did, it wasn't perfect. I'm a sinner. I failed again today. But I trust in my God. I know that he has covered over all of my sins. I know that he has sent a Savior for me. I know that he sent someone to die on the cross to take my sins away. I know that when he looks at me, I am not guilty. So I can go to sleep with a clear conscience. I'm not a perfect man. I never will be. But I know that God has taken my sins away. I know that he has forgiven me. And I know that whatever I do for the rest of my life, I'm doing it for him. I'm not going to do it for me. If I did it for me, that's selfish and it's not going to last. But even if I did something small and I did it for him, I know that sort of thing will have lasting value. Solomon says, a man can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in his work. And later on, he repeats that several times throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. If you can eat and drink and be happy with your wife, then you don't have to worry about anything else. That's a gift from God. You don't have to be married, but it helps sometimes. God gives us the ability to find enjoyment and happiness in small things. Because as you're looking back over your life, if you can remember back to when you were 16 or 18 or 21 and you had your life planned out in front of you, you knew what you were going to do. You were like George Bailey, running out there. I know what I'm going to do. I know what I'm going to build. I know where I'm going to go. I'm going to see the world. And looking back, you either have or you haven't. You may not have achieved everything on your bucket list. But every single day, to say, today is another day. Today is a day that God has blessed me. Today is a day that God has given me food and something to drink. God has given me people in my life, family and friends. Today is another day that I'm forgiven. Today is another day that for as little as I have on earth, I know there's something much greater waiting for me in heaven. Today is another day that I can be happy. I may not have achieved as much as my neighbor next door. I might not be as great as the next person. But I can have a meaningful life. I have had a meaningful life. Because everything that I have done, I did it for God, who loved me first. That's the attitude we ought to have. And I think even if we're playing something as silly as a card game or a ball game or a video game, and yes, that has purpose, even if we're playing something that seems trivial, if we're not just doing it for ourselves, but we're doing it for God, then it does have meaning. I mean, if we look back at our lives and we said, everything that I did it for me. I wanted to make my name great. I wanted to make a legacy for myself. That's not going to last. Give up on that idea. But work for God and recognize the blessings that he's already given to you. God has already given you a meaningful life. Go and live it. Amen.